Dun, dun, dun.
Welcome back to The Left Field, the podcast where four friends get together to talk about what's going on in their fantasy Congress league and what the Democrats are up to from a leftist perspective. We're your hosts. I'm Alexi Jenkins.
I'm Luis Pagan.
I'm Chandana Nabale.
And I'm Himanshu Pandey.
And today we have a special guest joining us from our Fantasy Congress League. We have discussed him and his notorious team, not in depth, but mentioned a decent amount of time, the illustrious lead of the Blue Dawgs team in the Left Field Fantasy Congress League. So we are welcoming to the podcast Corey Nettles. Corey, do you want to give us some information about yourself?
Hey, I'm Corey Nettles. I just kind of stumbled into the lead and never left because I made a really good choice, but doesn't mean anything about my political knowledge, which I'm sure you'll see today.
So we are getting close to closing out the season for our league. So we just did an 8-week season. So where's everyone at with their teams?
Number 2.
It's a tough couple weeks at the end there.
Yeah.
7-11 over here.
Right. Corey's at number 1.
And I'm on cloud 9. I'm on cloud 9 out of 11.
I'm just going to assume I'm second to last because that's where I've been literally. Okay, yeah. That sounds about right.
I have been surprised, though. When I check in, it was like a lot of Jesse's with second place a long time. And then a lot of people in Alexi's family just came from behind and shot up in the ranks. So I was really surprised.
They were surprised too.
Yeah, they're
Very surprised.
Milo and Nico.
I do think Chandan's, like, his journey of his team, speaker for the trees, from like dead last all the way to second place has been amazing. Like I had like no hope for it. I was like, wow, I guess that's it. And then bam, second place.
Yep.
Very impressive.
I've been sitting at second for kind of a while. I've been trying to catch Corey.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm the only one who's doing this, but I've been like hot on the waiver wires, like moving people on my team, like seeing how other people who are like haven't been picked up, have been scoring and like changing people out. So I'm an active participant on the league.
Wait, has anyone traded anyone?
I didn't know.
Nah.
I tried to get my brother to trade with me, but he was too smart to fall for my tricks. So,
Sad.
So Corey, do you want to talk a little bit about your team and how you achieved so much success?
How have you managed to be the front runner the entire time?
There's only really
2
one
words.
reason.
Chuck Schumer.
Yeah, exactly.
Chucky the shoe.
Pretty much it.
Chucky the shoe.
I mean, honestly, I've looked at the composition of the team. It's a pretty strong team, and I was doing a little bit of scenario analysis where, okay, if I didn't get Chuck Schumer, my other first pick was going to be Joe Manchin, because he's going to be, bipartisan. Let's talk about this guy on unending. And so I did a little scenario where, what if I got him instead of Chuck Schumer, and did some other changes. I'd still be pretty comfortably in the top half, but I don't think I'd be in the lead. So I put it all down to Chuck Schumer.
Yeah. I mean, Joe Manchin's really not even doing that good.
I did get a really good pick. What is it? David Cicilline, if I'm saying his name right?
Yep. Yeah,
he's been really strong. So I'm glad I got him.
He's actually progressive.
I've literally never heard of him before.
Would have been great if you did a profile on him. I don't know if you chose him today.
You know what? I should have, but I didn't. Oh, that's so sad for him. But yeah, just to close it out, the rest of the guys were kind of for the strategy, if anyone actually cares. I pretty much chose people that were heads of important committees that are, important for democratic and progressive ideals. So like environmental committees and labor committees and things like that. So I just figured they'd be the ones who would be in the spotlight at this time.
Who's the most left person on your team, would you say?
My Rokon.
Yeah.
Oh, you have Rokana?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Who is one of my weakest?
Yeah. As Lexi has found,
the progressive stars don't translate to fantasy Congress points.
AOC has actually shot up in her average point count, which has been nice.
He has carried me to keep me from the
Not
bottom.
in my position.
Yeah. Yep.
Should have picked Bernie. That's all I'm going to say.
The squad leader for sure. Yeah, so I guess we will take it into what was up with Congress this week. The short answer is almost nothing. We do say that every week, but this week it was quite literally almost nothing. So the House literally did nothing. They had every day of this past work week off because they are actually on a 3-week recess.
3 weeks
3 weeks.
Nice.
in March.
Yeah,
Is
so
that paid vacation?
Spring
Little
breakers.
PTO.
must be nice.
Go down to Cancun.
Miami Beach.
Yeah. Right. Super spreader, just join in on the party.
Allegedly, what they're up to, very allegedly, but according to Politico, they're spending the time putting together this really big Frankenstein infrastructure bill that is going to be like the next piece of legislation that they actually try to get passed through budget reconciliation. So allegedly, the Democratic committee chairs are each spending this time like putting together their piece of that puzzle to bring that all together after their nice extended recess to hopefully get something passed. So we will see about that. Then the Senate was actually in session, and in true Senate fashion, they did not do very much. So they had 13 pieces of legislation total, and it's pretty typical from the Senate, as we're finding out. Most of those were resolutions and not actual bills. So there were only 3 substantive bills that got passed in the Senate this week, and all 3 of them have to do with COVID and the stimulus. And they've all been talked about on this podcast before briefly, because they've all been passed in the House already. So one was the COVID-19 Bankruptcy Relief Extension Act, the PPP Extension Act, and the bill preventing across-the-board direct spending cuts to the stimulus package. So very slow week, and it's only going to get slower from here because after this week, the Senate is starting its own 2-week recess. So the next 2 weeks are going to be literally dead in Congress.
Wow. Not that much is going to get done in the first 100 days, huh?
I mean, they're already like, Joe Biden's team is heavily celebrating that they already reached their vaccination goal. So I've seen that touted a lot.
I mean, I remember when he first put out the like 100,000 vaccines in 100 days, there was a lot of people like, we're already doing like close to 1 million a day. Like, why are you even setting this as a goal? And he like apparently like clapped back and was like, oh, like we've got to be, starts. There was something. It was like something as part of his like candidacy where he's like already like grandpa snapping back at like random ass reporters.
I've thought Biden's been a little bit Trumpy lately with the way that he talks to reporters. It's been kind of self-aggrandizing a little bit of
Has he?
facts. He's talked so much about what he's done in the first 50 days, but at the same time, he's passed the stimulus bill and what else?
I mean, the vaccine goal, sure. He says he doubled his goal to 200 million instead of 100 million in the first 100 days. So it's like he was on track, but I mean that was 3 days ago. So
yeah,
but,
it's completely unsurprising that we hit that goal. To be honest,
he also, I mean, to take this with a grain of salt, but he did say that he was gonna run for re-election in 2024.
I did see that.
I saw that.
But I mean, to be honest, like the way the reporter phrased that question, it was more like kind of like, is this something on your mind? It's like, sure, like why not? That's like the sense that I got from.
Oh, got it. Okay, I didn't actually hear the audio clip.
That's such a kind of like bait and switch because I feel like everyone got very strong vibes that they were setting up Kamala to be the candidate for the next run and having it kind of just be like, oh, you have to do Joe Biden, but it's only kind of like a bridge to bigger and better things. His campaign didn't say that explicitly, but they were definitely communicating like that vibe. So it's annoying.
He did go into the presidency saying that he wanted to be like a one-term president, so just like a intermediary president. So
yeah, just like how Pelosi was going to give up the speaker's seat.
Was she ever planning on doing that?
I think when she was elected most recently, if you remember, the progressives were thinking about not voting for her. She said that she would, do one more term as speaker, and it would be her last term in the House.
When was that?
If you remember, when they last voted for Speaker of the House, the progressives were going to not vote for her, right? They were originally, I think they were looking at propping up AOC. Obviously, that wouldn't have gone through, but they were going to have someone run against her. In order to get all of the House to vote for her, she stated it would be her last term in the House.
So this was coming into this new Congress, right?
I actually think this was in 2018.
Okay, that sounds about right.
Oh, this is in 2018.
This was back in 2018, yeah.
Oh, well, yeah. How did that go?
Everyone forgot about this.
Yeah, including her.
Forgot, quote unquote.
Yeah.
Shall we get into Representative Yay or Nay? Cool. So for the listeners, Representative Yay or Nay is a segment where we profile one of the Democratic members of Congress. We try to do some of the slightly less famous members of our teams to get a sense for like what some of the people who don't get as much media attention all the time are doing to kind of build out our understanding of who's actually in there representing us. So the way the segment works is we go through the profile and then we all go around and either say if we want to yay or nay the representative. And that essentially is us stating whether we feel confident in this person's platform, their ideals, their ability to put those ideals into action, and whether if we saw their name on a piece of legislation, we would automatically feel good about that legislation, or whether we would want more information before passing a judgment on whether this person is actually in there fighting for the people or not. So this week we have Corey doing a profile of one of his high-scoring Blue Dawgs team members. So take it away, Corey.
Thanks. So in the spirit, I chose an actual Blue Dog Democrat to go with the name, but it's not someone on my team, but it's actually someone pretty interesting. And hopefully you guys will come around. I realize this is enemy territory.
Take him off right now.
We're going to be talking about Mike Thompson. He's a representative from California's 5th District. He's a member of the House Committee on Ways and Means, serves as chairman of the Select Revenue Measures Subcommittee.
Where is the 5th District in California? Because I'm going to know right away.
This is actually Napa Valley, Costa Con. I can't say that correctly. That area right next to Oakland.
Okay, got it. I know exactly. Yeah, this makes sense.
It's that area all the way up to kind of like San Bernardino, going around Oakland and coming a little bit around San Francisco, kind of that area.
It's rich white suburbs for people who aren't familiar with the Bay. I'm pretty sure, at least.
Yeah, no, it's all Napa Valley. It mostly consists of Napa County.
Which is interesting because he's also the co-founder and co-chair of multiple bipartisan groups, such as the Congressional Wine Caucus.
Oh,
that's right.
And the Congressional Sportsmen's Caucus.
Usually highly partisan.
He's a member of the Blue Dog Coalition, which they describes themselves as being Democrats committed to bipartisan problem solving and fiscal responsibility. So there you go. In 1990, he was the first Vietnam veteran selected to the California State Senate. He served in combat with the U.S. Army as a staff sergeant in the 173rd Airborne Brigade, where he was wounded and received a Purple Heart. He was also an instructor at the Army's Airborne School. While he's been in Congress, he spearheaded many initiatives. As co-chair of the Bipartisan Military Veterans Caucus, he led the effort to improve treatment options for service members suffering from post-traumatic stress and traumatic brain injury. Has authored many bills to help veterans find work as they transition back to civilian life. In the wake of school shootings in Newtown, Connecticut, he was named the chair of the House Gun Violence Prevention Task Force. Now, he is a hunter, a gun owner, and a self-described strong supporter of the Second Amendment. He also believes that Congress should do more to reduce gun violence. In February of 2013, Thompson's task force released a set of policy principles that they believe will reduce gun violence and respect the Second Amendment, including expanding the criminal background check system to all commercial firearm sales. That's why he voted to pass the Affordable Care Act and is working to build on the reforms made in the ACA to further improve everyone's access to affordable quality health. He was awarded Sierra Club's Edgar Wayburn Award for passing legislation that permanently protected over 250,000 acres of wilderness in Northern California. Oh, this is a good one. As a combat veteran, Thompson worked to end discriminatory policy of don't ask, don't tell. He's actually pretty strong on LGBT and immigrants' rights. And to close it out, he's a small vineyard owner. So that is Thompson in a nutshell.
So I'm going to guess his policy on healthcare is not Medicare for all.
This is interesting. So this will be really good. With all of our policy criteria we have, what would you guys guess? So Medicare for all, you're saying he's not for it. This is your guess.
Yeah.
How about the Green New Deal, climate action?
I'd say he's for
Maybe.
that.
Might be for that.
Yeah.
Northern California fires. Yeah, I'd say that's.
I would hope so. I mean, honestly, I would hope so out of all of these. But
Yeah, he owns a vineyard. I assume he knows firsthand the effects of climate change.
Okay. So reparations?
I'm going to guess no comment from him.
I'm not sure about that one. I can't. Yeah, I have no idea.
Indigenous rights?
Probably strong for that. I'm assuming he
I'm
supports
going to
that.
guess no comment.
I'm
Yeah,
gonna
that as
say
well.
no.
I'm just assuming like what is the most centrist Democrat, but like who looks good on paper. That's kind of what he sounds like. So I'm assuming he's for these things. Yeah.
Okay. Women's rights?
Of course. Yeah.
Obviously, yes.
Mhm.
Obviously. Police reform and defunding?
Police reform, yes. Defunding, not a chance.
Yeah, not
Not a chance. Okay. Drug reform?
Probably not a chance on drug reform. Well, no, he's in California. Hold
Yeah,
on.
probably definitely for cannabis.
Decrim. I would
don't
assume
know about anything.
decriminalization.
Maybe, but doubt it.
I don't know enough.
And-
I don't know enough.
Okay. What do you think being in California, his take on immigration?
Bad.
You already said he was.
No. I think
So,
isn't he a dreamer? Sorry, not a dreamer, but he's for the Dream
No.
Act.
Is he?
No,
I think so, yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
let's cover it.
That's not what Corey said, but
Long history of supporting immigration reform and immigrant rights. Co-sponsored the Dreamers
Yeah.
Act,
HR 6, yeah.
HR 6. Co-sponsored HR 541, keeping families together to keep immigrant families from being torn apart at the border. Co-sponsored HR 641, Agricultural Worker Program Act of 2019, to basically establish a blue card status for temporary agricultural workers. This is basically a path to permanent working status and citizenship for migrant workers here.
He's a vineyard owner. That make his
Yeah.
own labor source.
he's not on the border, so he doesn't have to be strong on immigration.
You guys are very transactional when you come.
oh,
Wait, so
100%.
let's go back up the list now.
We're gonna go back up.
Well, yeah, what were our assumptions? Yeah.
Wait,
Sure,
just, to
drug
be,
reform.
just to be clear though, I wouldn't classify any of those stances on immigration as leftist stances.
Yeah, no, I would.
They're like fine stances, they're moderate stances, but they're not leftist stances.
His stance to provide a path to citizenship for already in country, quote unquote, illegal immigrants. You wouldn't call that leftist?
no.
No.
Not
Not-
typically in how these programs are designed.
No.
Yeah.
Wait,
Yeah.
so what is the stance on Medicare for all?
Well, let's go through the list in reverse order. So, Medicare for All, co-sponsor of HR 676, expanding and improving Medicare for All Act. We can go down. Green New Deal as actually a co-sponsor.
Yeah, figured.
Reparations, co-sponsor of HR 40, commission to study and develop reparation proposals for African Americans Act. Indigenous rights, while he was on the House Ways and Means Subcommittee, he actually led the hearings examining the impact of the tax code on Native American tribes. It was the committee's first hearing on the tribal tax issues in 25 years. It was actually something he spearheaded to get moving. LGBTQ voted yay on HR 5, the Equality Act, which is basically expanding civil rights to cover things like gender identity and things of that nature. Women's rights introduced the bipartisan National Women's History Month resolution. The legislation honors the history of women in our nation and recommits to the work of spotlighting the often untold stories of women.
Okay, that doesn't do shit. That doesn't do shit.
The bill also recognizes the roots of Women's History Month right in Thompson's own district.
That does
So he's
not
actually-
do shit.
Police reform and defunding, co-sponsored HR 7120, the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act of 2020, basically police reform.
No, that one does not defund, though. We've talked about this on this podcast. That one increases funding for the police.
The only place he's actually had an issue is drug reform decriminalization. He co-sponsored the states' rights to medical marijuana act to kind of allow medical use of marijuana in accordance to the laws in different states. But he has kind of a mixed voting history on drug reform itself. Prominent legislation right now, honestly, is couldn't find anything.
Yeah, so one thing that I will say is it's like if you look at the list of co-sponsors for Medicare for All, Green New Deal, like everyone and their mother is on.
It's everyone.
It's like literally like, and it's like literally people who don't even support the policy, but like basically get to say that they're a co-sponsor and can use that information. Like, for example, Kamala Harris, right? Co-sponsor Medicare for All, actively shits on Medicare for All. It's just like, so that to me actually doesn't, the indigenous rights stuff was interesting. But that was the only real thing that I felt like.
So Chandan, are you yaying or naying?
I feel like I need more information, to be honest. I mean, there's a potential for him to be fine, but like all that military history kind of makes me a little wary, to be perfectly honest. I would say I'm like a tentative nay at this stage, pending more information.
He-Man?
It depends on like the legislation that he's on, right? Like if I don't ever expect to see his name on legalizing marijuana federally, right? Perhaps, I mean, so I was going through his website really quick just to see what he actually supports. Does not like the fact that we're in so many wars. So I mean, I appreciate that. He says like Congress hasn't obtained, or sorry, the president hasn't obtained congressional approval for these wars recently, and he's like outraged by that. Again, it could just be on paper, but it seems like he wants to withdraw from Syria. Again, I would need more information. He seems sound in some areas, but it depends on the legislation for me, whether I'd feel confident or not.
Right. It sounds like he's going to vote for any particularly popular bill that's proposed by the Democrats, but I don't see him spearheading, progressive agenda.
Oh, of course, yeah. So I mean, but I would, if you consider him like a signal, right? If I see him on some legislation that's like super left, like if he ends up actually being like for Medicare for all, like if he forced a vote, obviously he's probably not going to vote for it. He's about expanding the ACA. But if I saw him vote in line with Medicare for all, that'd give me more confidence in other centrist Democrats' policy. Like he would definitely be a signal in that direction if he were to vote. So I will say that.
Luis, do you want to give a yay or nay?
I would give him a tentative yay. I don't see anything particularly bad on his resume. But I also, again, I don't see him being a leader of leftist, policy or anything like that.
It doesn't seem like tangible enough to me to have full confidence in seeing his name on a piece of legislation and automatically feeling like, oh yeah, like this guy's on our side. I feel like he's kind of one of those ones who like Alex Padilla, where it's kind of hard to pin down exactly what he'll go for. So just because of that, because I think I'm still a little unclear on what his ideology actually is, I'm going to go ahead and nay him for now.
Going back to what we talked about, there's a difference between co-sponsoring a bill because it's easy to jump onto it, and then coming out with a very firm statement of why I'm a part of this bill. And that's a firm statement. So I think he may not be an ally to the liberal side for everything, but I think he's a ally on the things that count. And he's a dependable voting bloc. He votes pretty much the way the liberal side wants. So, unlike Joe Manchin. So I'm going to give him a yay.
All right. So I think everyone else on chat except for Corey is ready for this. On the Green New Deal and on just general addressing climate change, I personally feel like conservation of wildlife and just generally not fucking with, endangered species is probably a pretty important part of it. I know you'd mentioned before that he is a hunter, but he's kind of taken that to a pretty extreme angle. So these are some of the things that are just straight up on the Wikipedia page for Thompson. He has voted against banning ivory imports. He has voted several times in favor of polar bear trophy importation. And polar bear trophy importation, really, I mean, that's just
puts the. I mean, anyways, he has helped defeat legislation to halt the use of dogs in hunting black bears. He has co-authored and voted for a bill to resume trophy hunting of cougars, and not the kind that, yeah. He has voted on limits to new commercial logging in Alaska's Tongass National Forest, which I believe is like the world's largest evergreen forest. And he has also supported military intervention in many foreign countries, which is separate from his like pretty horrific environmental stances in those areas. Based on my research, he does seem to be a genuine defender of the Green New Deal. Like, he has put out like campaigns for the Green New Deal. I do. It is interesting, like kind of just seeing there are definitely a lot of individuals, and I think to a certain interesting point, Himanshu had put in this comment in our chat saying climate change is an existential threat to expanding his trophy collection.
That's kind of, all right. That's funny.
But apart from that, in terms of Medicare for all, he does have a stance on Medicare for all, but he does seem like a public option person. The sense that I get is he's not really. He's more advocating for a public option and just like healthcare reform. It doesn't really seem like he's for like nationalized healthcare or like universal healthcare in the way that Medicare for all is. So is he a leftist? I would say no. I mean, I think that's a pretty definitive no. Is he fine? Like, it's like not awful as I thought it would be, but like I don't even honestly, like, I just can't even stomach his stance on the Green New Deal, just considering his stances on hunting. They just seem very, very polar opposite to me. So there are a lot of politicians that use this as marketing ploys. I mean, like, there's no other way to say it. Like, I mean, these are re-election bids to a certain degree. And they know, and he knows that California's base to a certain degree probably does have a positive stance on the Green New Deal. So it does benefit him and it probably is self-serving to a certain degree, right? Like, those ecosystems being preserved does allow him to continue hunting. Like, it actually does. It's in his favor. He owns a vineyard. Climate change probably is not a good thing for his vineyard. It's like, so I do think that it's interesting sometimes to see people's stances when it's like not self-serving at all, right? When you support something that isn't going to even tangibly benefit you, but I can actually see a connection where his stance on climate change can actually monetarily benefit him and his interests. So I see a connection as to why he would support those things. So it's not even necessarily that like I just want to make sure that he's checking these boxes. For me, it's almost like, is he a genuine person that seems to care about the people? And for this one, at least on the Green New Deal, it does seem like he's supporting it for self-serving reasons. So yeah. Anyways, I maintain my previous vote. Let's just say that.
Yeah, doing a little bit more research on him, he's been in the House of Reps since 1999, so he's been around for a while. It seems like he did have, he was initially like very environmentally friendly very early on into his career as a House representative, but I don't think that he's really kept up with the times when it comes to that.
I wanted to go back to something that you said earlier, Corey, about him being like a pretty solid vote for the Liberal Democrats. And I agree with that. I think that that's totally true. I think he is a more solid blue vote than a lot of the other Democrats, and like way, way, way more solid, as you pointed out, than Joe Manchin. But I just think that that's just not good enough anymore. And I know that looking at American politics from a leftist perspective can seem very negative, because you're always going to have to be calling out the people who are doing a little bit of the right thing, because it's not far enough. Like, I feel like we're at a place now where we need to call people out and say, that's not good enough for us. Like, the things that are on our list of important priorities that he doesn't think are important, like, those people are super, super important. So I don't want, personally for me, from an ideological standpoint, I don't want to like settle for putting my support behind somebody who I don't think is fully there, because I want to demand really great representation from our representatives and really transformative change. And that means that I'm probably going to nay 90% of the reps we talk about. But that's just the way it is. Like, I don't feel comfortable lowering my standards to what is cool with the liberal Democrats, because that's not cool with me politically. And I just think our country's political priorities and what we're willing to accept in terms of politics is so skewed that I don't want to apply that lens to my own framing of like what's an acceptable way to treat your constituents.
That's fair. I'll give a counterpoint, but not anything as in depth. I'll just say that we don't want the perfect to be the enemy of the good. You're not going to find a lot of perfect candidates who are doing exactly what you want. But if you finding actual representatives that are on board with a lot of the policies, and they're able to, in football terms, maybe you're not getting the touchdowns all the time, but you're like kicking those field goals and moving the goalpost a little bit, and putting the yardage on. I know there's a pushback against incrementalism as being not good enough, but I feel that if someone's incremental on so many different things, that if I were to imagine that it was only him in Congress voting, we would have probably 90% of the stuff that we want. So I'm happy with a person who's like that, because I think it's good, not perfect. That's all.
Yeah, I think that's definitely like a big ideological divide amongst Democrats is incrementalism the way to go? Like with the Biden Democrats, the Obama Democrats, that's very much the approach of the establishment wing of the party. Personally, my take on this, and I think the take of a lot of leftists, is that incrementalism is really just a strategy to avoid doing these things. You put it off to a future day so you never have to do it. And I think that in the realm of racial justice, this has been a really great example of the Democratic Party kicking the can down the road and saying like, oh, we're doing a little, so the ball's still moving, the arc is still bending towards justice. So don't come at us about this. When really, if you look at what's been done on the issue of racial justice, it has not achieved the things that it should have in this big span of time. Like, we should be way farther than we were during the civil rights movement, and like we're really not. So personally, my political philosophy is that change doesn't happen in tiny steps, it happens in big pushes. So that's why I always look for big pushes rather than the small changes.
I think another thing that we've sort of learned through the time we've been doing the rep yes, yay or nay, is that there are some representatives that have been around that have agreed with the right things, from long ago, like Bernie Sanders, Steve Cohen, who have been fighting the same fight for 40, 50 years, and they've not had to change their tune with the times because they've been on the right side of history this entire time. I think we need more of those people in, and while I'm willing to accept the good instead of perfect for the time being, I think the further we go down this road, we're going to need more people pushing for the right policies, for the far left policies.
So I want to put in a take for a genuine, like, anger. I think incrementalism is incredibly dangerous. I think essentially what it allows us to do is provide an excuse for it's one of those things where like you put in like a small policy for the environment, and you have the Democratic Party be like, we did an environment thing this year, so we don't have to do another, we can move on to our other thing, right? It's almost a like it's incrementalism to a slow death, more or less. We just like we can't, like, I would almost prefer no policy than some small policy, because that would almost mean a big policy next year versus 3 small, like basically 30 small policies over 30 years that would have done what a big policy that second year would have done. And it's like, I think it's incredibly dangerous. Yeah, that's my take on incrementalism. I don't think we can afford the alternative. If Mike Thompson is to believe himself in that statement as to like climate change is an existential crisis, no more polar bear trophies. Like we just can't even afford in any conscience of like a reality that we can have both. We can't have both. Like there's just no, like we have to address these issues with the genuine severity that they are at, and anything short of that is literal suicide. So yeah, I don't know. I can't be on board with it. I think we need to get those people out of government as soon as possible.
So I would say I agree with the general sense of like I dislike incrementalism as well. I feel like that's like it's like when I think of incrementalism, I think of like the war in Iraq, right? It's just like, hey, we're doing it, or like a war in Afghanistan, right? Like we went there to go find Osama bin Laden, and now it's like, why are we there? It's like, oh, we're fighting the terrorists. We're just like 1% better this year, and therefore progress is justified. But on the other hand, like there's only so much you can expect from Napa Valley. If we're just strictly going back to the candidate profile, like I wouldn't expect Napa Valley to go like, oh yeah, we're full blown leftists, guys. We've disseminated all of the wealth all of a sudden. Like everyone is UBI here now, guys. Like I don't see that happening anytime soon. The fact that this guy with his like whole hunting thing has been elected, yeah, of course. Like these are the people that are in Napa Valley, right? They're like, yeah, like thank goodness he got me my polar bear trophy this year. I wouldn't have done it without him. Thank you, Mike Thompson, right? But at the same time, you have to work with what you kind of have, which is like what I agree with, like on Corey's point, where it's like, yes, he's an old blue dog for sure, and that's like what you can expect from him. But he's definitely like the more left blue dog that I was expecting. Like, granted, again, you can't be like, you can't shoot a giraffe and be like, yeah, I'm a leftist, right? But at the same time, it's like, okay, cool, you're at least like on board with similar policies. Like, should you be dragged to the left, you'll acquiesce, right? And that's what I think you can expect the most out of these kinds of candidates. I don't think you can be like, like, okay, if Napa Valley elects, the next AOC, great, cool, amazing. I don't know how you guys did it, but I'd love to see it, and I would like absolutely support that movement. But given where the candidate is, like I would say he's pretty left for where he is at. So incrementalism in like that sense makes sense, but like I think the way to combat incrementalism is like from an outsider perspective, where it's like the counties and areas around them, when radical change becomes the status quo, that's when incrementalism kind of goes away, right? It's like, okay, it's radical to be incremental, right? That's a very extremist position you're taking. It's like, hey, we're kind of doing nothing. Like when we're saying, hey, like we got to fix this sooner. So I think we should expect more from, like, for me, where I like fighting is like championing the candidates that actually say the things that they mean, right? So like the people that are saying that they're progressive, and all of a sudden, like Kamala Harris, for example, right? Medicare for all, actually not really, just kidding. Medicare for all those who want it, no, not really, right? Those are the people that I think you should like slap across the face and like drag them through the mud, be like, hey, look, like we can't accept this, right? If you're gonna be on our side, be on our side. Like you don't just give us like lip service, right? But exactly. So that's what I'm saying. Like this guy, Mike Thompson, all in all, incrementalism, radical change included, I think he's far left, not like further left than I was expecting for Napa Valley. So hopefully next year he'll be somebody better. Yeah.
I will also say that I feel like there's been, and I've noticed this a lot in the South specifically, where we're kind of like, oh yeah, I mean he's progressive for Alabama, but if you think about it, like Napa Valley, like that wine country is going to be severely impacted by climate change, and like the forest fires, like they need Medicare for all.
I think it's like a failure of political strategy on the Democrats' part as well, because we don't have to accept the political map as it is, as red or blue. Like going back 40 years when the Republicans put in their big political strategy to rebuild their party from being super unpopular to having like the groundswell of support it has today, is literally by focusing on low-level races, local races, building their ground game, appealing to local issues. And that's how they got all of the state governments, all of the local governments, and built the base of power that led them to continue to be a real force in American politics when they should have died out 40 years ago. And the Democrats haven't done that. Like the Democrats focus on federal races. They focus only on the really elite seats and the big ticket items. But if you ran a candidate in Napa Valley, like if you had a strong Democratic Party in Napa Valley and you focused on local issues that you know people really cared about, and you didn't let the right make the narrative about just like the more sensationalist issues that they latch on to, like calling all Democrats socialists, stuff like that. Like if you focused it on local issues and like, we're going to improve your life in this way, and did that over the course of decades, those seats wouldn't stay red. You would get seats flipping because people would actually see their interest reflected in what the party was talking about. But that is not the strategy at all that the Democratic Party has taken. And it's really shows right now, because the party has no ground game. Like it's a miracle that the Democratic Party has as much power as it does right now.
Yeah. I mean, on that point, like one could argue that climate change has not hit any area in the United States harder than perhaps that area in California. So to not expect an environmental justice or climate champion in that area, there's like literally no other place that we need one more than there. You know, I think we can absolutely expect someone in that area to be so frustrated that they actually have very nuanced and good and relevant policies that can drive the national conversation from that area. And we need to find those people. We need to uplift those people. And I think this is definitely the case with Louisiana, for example, right? We just cast it off as red, devastated by climate change. No, there's no way there isn't an individual in that area that has extremely like thoughtful and like experience-based policies on climate change and addressing wetlands and like protecting shorelines that can help the national conversation. We absolutely need to find people in these reddest of red areas that really can like majorly help us in this fight. So yeah, I think we need to stop with the whole like, oh yeah, it's fine for this area that we've just long expected to be red or Democrat or blue or whatever it might be, right? Like these are shared problems ultimately. So yeah, I mean, I just don't consider these to be red or blue issues. They're just human issues.
Yeah. So one thing to note is that as recently as September of 2020, 70,000 some people had to flee from Santa Rosa due to the wildfires recently. If you're representing that area and that isn't one of your primary concerns to the point where you want to radically change environmental policy, something's wrong.
Yeah.
So I have to jump in here. It was very interesting. One of the things you said, Chandan, you said in these reddest of areas, there are people who are having a lived experience of, you know, climate issues and that. And the focus that you were getting at was that, you know, these people would be open to a climate policy discussion because they've had this experience. We also talked about Thompson, and a lot of the way he was characterized on here was, oh, he cares about immigration because, you know, it helps his bottom line, or he cares about the environment because, oh, he owns a winery, it helps his bottom line. I would argue that maybe it's because it's his lived experience. He works with these people.
Yeah.
He lives in this area. So it may not be coming from a situation of greed, but a situation of empathy, you know? So I think that reaching out and not writing these people off, you know, very similar to how you would reach out to people in Louisiana to talk to them. You know, Thompson is that type of person that maybe you could he could be brought along to more of the left side of things like climate and immigration, at least because of his lived experience. So we shouldn't write him off as just being, a politician who does whatever helps his bottom line. That's kind of how I would look at it.
I mean, he's the one who described himself as a fiscal conservative and that being one of his top priorities. So I think with that lens, looking at his decisions through an economic framework makes a lot of sense. I don't think he's given any indication that he's doing any of these things out of like the goodness of his heart.
And if he were to be coming from an empathetic standpoint when it comes to immigration, why would you put people on a path to citizenship that takes like 10 years of working where you can't leave the country? Like, there are far easier ways to bring these people into your country and to give them protections than the different pathways that are being proposed currently in Congress.
Also, who doesn't love cougars, right? Come on.
I feel like a joke about that has been like percolating in your brain for the past 30 minutes, but has yet to materialize.
Don't we have a bill that we're supposed to cover?
There weren't any bills, so no.
Oh, right. Oh my God. Devastating.